Hey, estate planning attorney Paul Rabalais here, and in this video, we're going to talk about what happens or what to do when a trustee steals money from a trust. Okay, tough situation. It's happened before and it's going to happen again. Sometimes trustees steal money from a trust. You might say, how could that happen? Let me give a couple of examples. Let's say a dad, either during his lifetime or upon his death, he either transfers assets to or leaves assets to a trust upon his death. And let's say he leaves assets in a trust for his quadriplegic son who can't handle money, but of course he wants to provide for his son. So he leaves assets to his son in a trust, but he names his daughter as the trustee. So maybe a couple of years after Dad dies, things are rolling along. Daughter's the trustee of the son's trust, and she's using the trust assets for his needs. But then daughter gets a taste of the drug stuff, and now she needs extra money to support her drug habit. So she's the one who controls all of the trust accounts. She's the one who has signature authority on the trust account. So she starts, just taking distributions from the trust account and spending all of that money on herself, going out and buying drugs. That's a tough one. Or maybe husband died and he left his estate because he wanted to provide for both his spouse and his children. He left his estate in a trust, perhaps named his surviving wife as the trustee, and provided in the trust instrument that his wife, after he died, can use the trust assets for her health, education, maintenance, and support. And then when his spouse dies, all those trust assets revert back to his children. But after the husband dies, assets go in the trust. His surviving wife is the trustee. She gets married. Her husband has a lot of influence over her, and she starts pulling assets out of the trust to spend on him, to spend on them, to do things other than for her health, education, maintenance, and support. Or maybe dad dies. Real simple scenario. Perhaps he had a revocable living trust. He dies. Trust says assets are to go equally to the 3 children. When he dies, he has a son and 2 daughters. The son's the oldest. He names his son as the successor trustee of his revocable living trust. Dad dies. Son, within a matter of days, gets access to all of the trust accounts. And before he disperses those trust accounts to the 3 beneficiaries in 3 equal portions, he pulls money out and he does whatever with it. Takes trips, goes around the world, goes and gambles. So those are all things that sometimes they happen. Same thing could happen with a probate estate. Dad dies with a will, makes certain provisions in his will. As part of the probate settlement, the executor pools all of dad's funds into an estate account that the executor has signature authority over. And before the assets get dispersed to the heirs, the executor squanders all the money. So serious stuff. And I want to focus on what our trust code says, and it can vary from state to state, but a lot of this stuff is really similar from state to state. This is a tough situation. It's bad and it's serious. So here's the deal. Most trust instruments waive the bond requirement for the trustee, especially for the individual trustee. So what does that mean? That means if a trustee is required to post a bond to be the trustee, then the trustee, before he takes his position as trustee, he's got to go to an insurance company, perhaps purchase a bond and maintain that bond during his scope as the trustee. And what that does is if he squanders the money, the bond protects the beneficiaries. But almost all trust instruments waive that bond requirement because it's often an unnecessary expense if you have a good trustee. Now, I will say there's a general rule. I'm going to go to our trust code here and point out a couple of things. So here's the general rule on the liability of the trustee. It says that if a trustee commits a breach of trust, skimming money off the trust is a breach of trust. And it could be in the form of just taking the money and going and spending it. It could be in the form of excess compensation. But if a trustee commits a breach of trust, he shall be chargeable with 1, a loss or depreciation in value of the trust estate resulting from a breach of trust, or a profit made by him through breach of trust, or a profit that would have accrued to the trust estate if there had been no breach of trust. So, obviously, if a trustee steals money from a trust, the trustee is responsible for paying it back. But what if the money's not there? What if the trustee squandered the money? That's when there's a problem. So, I would say, if you suspect any, upon the first notion that you're suspecting funny business from a trustee, you're going to want to rely on another statute that we have in our trust code. And you're going to immediately want to request information based on a statute that says that a trustee shall give to a beneficiary upon his request at reasonable times. So anytime a beneficiary upon his request at reasonable times, a trustee shall give a beneficiary upon his request at reasonable times complete and accurate information as to the nature and amount of the trust property, and permit him or a person duly authorized by him to inspect the subject matter of the trust and the accounts, vouchers, and other documents relating to the trust. So if I'm a beneficiary of a trust and I see that trustee going out and buying a new Lambo, driving around town and doing a lot of travel and where is that trustee getting the money? Immediately, I'm demanding to see all of the trust account statements. I want to know that the money's still there, so I'm going to ask for that immediately. And then maybe one other rule as to a remedy of the beneficiary. Let me get to that one. Oh, if you know that the trustee did something wrong, you got to get him out of there. So a beneficiary of a trust may institute an action to compel a trustee to perform his duties as trustee, to enjoin a trustee from committing a breach of trust, to compel a trustee to redress a breach of trust, or to remove a trustee. So if trustee ain't doing their job, you got to bring that petition to remove that trustee. Perhaps the trust instrument has a succession in line as to who the next trustee would be, or if there's not that succession, maybe there's a method for determining who would be the trustee in the absence, or in the event of a vacancy in the office of trustee. So in addition to all of that civil liability, when a trustee steals money from the trust, there's the potential for criminal, liability, which is theft, which means going to jail and that kind of thing. But quite frankly, even if they get convicted of theft, that's not going to do the beneficiaries any good unless they can recover those trust funds that were taken, and sometimes they can't because the money's just not there. So the moral of this story is that you hate to see it, you hate to even talk about it, but you really need to be careful with your trustee designation and your executor designation, particularly when you're selecting an individual trustee or making an individual trustee designation. Not only be careful in the initial trustee designation, but also in your successor trustee designations in case that first trustee that you named can't serve for some reason or gets removed as trustee. You want to make sure the successors are on board and they can do the job. If you have the suspicion that, I want to appoint my son to do this, or I want to appoint my nephew, but I don't feel 100% confident that they are going to be prompt, on board, accurate, meet all of the deadlines. I don't know if they're really going to fulfill their duty of loyalty to the beneficiary, because all trustees have that duty of loyalty to the beneficiary. Then perhaps you can consider appointing co-trustees. That way, one rogue trustee can't go squander the money by himself or herself. Any trustee action would require both of those co-trustees to take a trustee action. One other important point is I want to make sure you hit the like button. That tells the YouTube algorithms show Paul's videos to a few more people. Also want to make sure, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. And then one more thing, football season starts tomorrow. My LSU Tigers are the defending national champions. We're excited about football season. We'll see you next time.